Hello everyone, I'm Luke. This is the first video in a series of videos where I will be explaining different things like variables and blueprints in detail. Today I'm going to be explaining booleans, and let's just hop right in. So the very first thing is, let's see what a boolean actually is. So if I create a blueprint class, my basic light, I've already got some other blueprints which I've set up, so they're very similar to this, but this one will do for now. Okay, so now we're inside here, and this is a sort of a dark room. It gets a lot brighter, but all the same, you can tell a big difference whenever you just add a light point to the room. So this is going to be my basic light blueprint. And if I open this basic light blueprint up and drag it in here, I can actually take and add a light, point light right here, compile it, and you can now see, voila, there's light. But what if you want the ability to turn this light on and off? Okay, so to do that, you need to have a construction script like this and a boolean. So we're going to create a boolean variable, and you can do that right here under the My Blueprint tab here. And we're going to just call this bool, like so. And this is currently not a public boolean, but we can make it a public boolean just by clicking on this I right here. So now the I is clicked, it's wide open, and we can take this and set the visibility of the point light directly right there. That's the simplest way to do it. So if the boolean is turned on, the light will be on, and you can turn it on or off in the details panel right here. But you can actually also reverse those values, and so that's done with something like the not boolean, which basically takes whatever the boolean is and makes it the opposite. So if we try this out, we can, if it's true, the light will be turned off, and if it's false, then the light will be turned on. So this works exactly the opposite of how it was working before. On, off. And it happens right away, immediately. So you get to kind of see the visual difference inside the editor. Now you could actually do the exact same setup here inside of the event graph, but then if you were to do that with something like, say, event begin play, you won't be able to see the result of that until you're actually in the session. So if that was the case, right, and we were to have this construction script disconnected, then I turn this boolean on, for example. Sorry, we'll just have it off. On and off, no difference. You have to actually enter gameplay to see the difference. So there's a strong light right now, and if I turn that off, there's no longer a strong light, but you can't see that from the editor. So having this in the construction script is very useful, whereas having it in the event graph is not. This is an example of a public variable boolean. So if you turn it on or off, it instantly makes a difference, and that's basically what a boolean does. It allows you to instantly give a yes or no answer, and either something happens or something doesn't happen depending on the value. Why would you ever want to not have a boolean exposed? So if it's not exposed, you can't see it, you can't actually mess with it. So right now we have no way of turning this light on. Why would you want that? So that's why we've actually created these my light and switch combination. So here we've got the setup. There is a light, which we've got right here, and we've got this switch right here. And the switch either starts in the on position or the off position, which you can see according to the letters right here. So right now it's in the off position. You can also see it in the details panel. But if you turn it on, then the light also automatically will turn on, just to start with. Now, essentially, in here, you can see that it turns the light on and off, even if this isn't something that we're showing. So right now we've got the boolean, it is exposed, but even if we didn't have it exposed, it doesn't matter. We don't want it exposed, we don't need it exposed, because we can just use this one blueprint to mess with that light, just like that. So that's an example of why you would want to have that set up like that. Now, if you wanted to make something like this yourself, here's a little bit of the code for how this is all working. So here, every tick or every frame, your point light has its visibility set. It'll be turned on, otherwise it'll be turned off, and this happens, 30 or 40 times a second, something like that. So it's very, very reactive, is what that means. It can turn on or off depending on what this value is, basically instantly. Then here we've got the switch. So basically we've got this big box. It's just a purple wireframe. If you come into collision with anything on the inside of that space, then you basically trigger this sequence of events to happen, whatever's connected to this box. Because the character is made up of multiple parts, which I can demonstrate, right? We've got inside of the character 1 box, 2 box, 3 box, 4 box. We've got an arrow that's built in. We've got a camera. We've got a mesh that currently isn't enabled. All of these different parts to the character. And if something was to overlap just a split second afterwards, it can trigger the switch twice, which would make this light turn on and off very rapidly, and you wouldn't even be able to see that anything happened. So basically the do once thing, just make sure that it only happens once. Then there's a 0.2 second delay, which is barely noticeable. And after that, the on and off switch value stuff changes. So basically what's happening here is it reads the variable on and off switch. If it's true, it sets to false. If it's false, it sets to true. It's that simple. And then it sets the visibility for the on and off switch, which is this right here. So it'll either turn the switch on or off, basically. And that's just a visual hint to what's actually happening. And then, after that, it casts to the light and sets the boolean of the light, which is this right here, this my bool. Same thing here, my bool. We set that to be the exact value of this. So it's that simple. And then we also change the sign, what it's going to say. And for some reason, this room does still start off dark, despite the fact that I threw in here this piece of code, which basically will set the visibility of the point light. I think the reason that it's making a difference is because it's not actually setting the value as it should. Because remember, every tick, my boolean overrides. So right now, this works great for the construction script, but it doesn't work so well here. So the better approach here, instead of setting the visibility, is to set my boolean directly, and we'll set my boolean directly to be the on and off switch value as soon as we begin. Which means we've got instant light in the room, and we turn the light off and on, and it'll work perfectly every single time. Everything's always going to be in sync with whatever this value is as far as this light goes. And it doesn't really matter what the light is, although in this case we're using that light. We could actually do this with a series of lights, I'm pretty sure. So if we change the variable type, what we could do is we could do this for every single light. So we could basically run a for each loop, for example. And so this requires a little bit of code modification, but it's worth it. So we set the array in there, and then for each one, we're going to set the boolean, just like so. And then we also need to kind of do the exact same thing here. And then, just like that, and now we've got to do that for these parts of the thing. So, and now this all works. So the beauty of this is if I was to add in another light, like this one here, this can now actually use both of those lights, like so. So we'll have light 1, and if I was to just have the one light right now, only one of the lights turn on. But if I were to use the second light as well, light 2, now both of them are affected by this switch. Which means if I was to have another switch like this on the other side of the room, we can actually affect both of these different lights according to this. So the interesting thing also is we get to change the light colors. So we can have one that's green, for example, and one that's red, and in fact we'll add in another one that's blue. We can also rename these. So we'll have this one here. This is green. So can we just rename the actor? I think we can. So we'll rename it to green, and then we'll rename this other light. So this one's red, and then we're going to add in another light, and we'll rename this one to blue, And then of course we've got to make the color match, right? So there's a nice blue. So there's your red, green, and blue pixels, essentially. And so then you can have one for red, one for green, and you could also have one for blue, right? So these are your 3 different values for this test project. And currently these are all affecting the exact same lights. But what we can do is we can make it so each of these has one color, which it goes for. So this one will go for the green color, and this one will go for the blue colored light. They can also each have a starting on and off value. So this one can be off, and this one can be off, for example, and we'll leave the blue on, so we have a little bit of light. And then when we turn this one on, and we turn this one on, we've got the green, the red, and the blue turn on and off. So kind of beautiful. It works perfectly, and it looks really nice. And that's pretty much it. Now, if you wanted to, you could also have one of these that actually controls multiple lights as well. So you could have this one control the green one, and the blue one, and the red one. And you turn that one on, and you turn these others off. It doesn't actually overwrite it, but if you wanted to turn this one off, that does override all of them. So some very interesting logic can be set up this way, and I think it's just interesting. Another thing I think that might be worthy of note is that Booleans can be linked together. So let's say that unless 2 Booleans were true, something won't happen. So the way that would work, let's say that there's another type of switch, essentially. So there's a switch, I'm going to call it the value switch. And the value switch turns the regular value of one of these switches to something else. So essentially, this will be set up like this. And instead of actually linking to the light, we will cast a switch instead. And then we'll set this secondary variable, which we haven't yet created, which we'll call, I guess, bool2. So boolean 2, right here, this boolean is essentially going to be something that communicates with the value switch. Okay, so this is the on and off switch, and what I want to do is I want to set the boolean 2 right here according to this thing. And I do that in either case for the on or the off position, right? Off value, on value. I want to do it for both of those right here. And so it should be that simple to just set those values, which of course would be true, except it's not really true, but the reason for that is because this hasn't been compiled yet. So now that all works properly. Okay, so now the next step is inside of the switch. What we want to do is we want to make it so that in order to actually do any of this stuff, both the boolean 2 and the on and off switch have to be true. And so this is another example of where you would want private logic instead of public logic. So that's where instead of instance editable with the IOpen, it's closed, right? And then what we want to do is we want to basically use branch logic. So the branch logic, again, compares if one boolean is true and another boolean is true. So this is a very simple logic we can use. We could also just build this logic from scratch, but we'll just throw it in there like so, because that's easier. But if you wanted to see what this looks like if you built it from scratch, it's basically you take the branch, and only if it's true do you go through something else, which is basically your secondary branch right here, where you would go on like so. So it would be bool2 true, on and off switch true. But the easier way to do that, because they've already made that for us, is to just use this AND logic. So we basically just plug that in right here. We compare these two, and if both of them are true, then we proceed to do whatever we're going to do. And so, actually, I don't think we're supposed to do this inside of the construction script specifically. We'll just throw this in here like so for the regular functions, right? So the only time that we want to actually change the my light thing is if both the on and off switch is true and the bool switch is true. We'll just go ahead and build this, and then we'll just move this down to keep it nice, neat, and orderly. You can see what everything is right where it's supposed to be. So a very important thing whenever you're coding is organization. The value switch actually doesn't know which switch to cast to, so we need to make that a public variable. Just for simplicity's sake, we would quickly modify how that worked. I'm just going to fix it back up here where it should just work perfectly again. And if it's on, it should work. If it's off, it shouldn't care what the switch says, which is actually acting correctly. So we can turn this on and off, but the switch doesn't actually light up or light, down. See? That's exactly what you're looking for. Okay, so now we've added several different layers of complexity, and it's kind of hard to keep track of the different things because of the fact that if we were trying to keep track of all of this, it's just hard because you can't tell the difference between a value switch and a regular switch. So we're going to make it a little bit easier by messing with this texture real quick. We're just going to select a basic asset texture for the value switch, which just kind of looks like a very smooth metal. And then for the regular switches, we'll just have this white, or we can even change that one to have another basic asset that's like more orange. Not that that's very pretty to the eyes, nobody likes the way that looks, but it helps. And then if we were to come in here, we can actually add in the value switch and tell the difference between this and the rest of these switches. Right off the hand, we can tell which one is the value switch and which one is not the value switch. And so we'll have this value switch up against this wall right here, and then the rest of them we'll have in their positions. We're actually going to take this wall and back it up a little bit, like so. And we'll also extend this wall to close the building, and this wall, and the roof, just like so. So now we've got a longer building. That way that's just a little bit less annoying. And one last thing that I want to do is quickly modify the value switch in a way that I hadn't originally planned to do, which is to change the variable type to an array. And that should be really nice as well. And there, just like so. And then in the construction script, do we need to do anything? I don't think so. Yeah, this was all working perfectly. So then we've actually got the ability to cast to multiple switches and pull the same logic off from multiple different switches. So this is the power of arrays, right? So now we're going to cast to all of our different switches, and we also need to know that this here is the red switch, right? So we're actually going to call this switch red, and then we'll have a secondary switch which we'll call switch green. And then we'll take this one and we'll modify it to be called switch blue, like so. And then we can take this one and link switch red, switch green, and switch blue in here, just like so. And so now this should all be in here, and when we turn all of these on, it just works, right? When we turn this off, these should turn off, but then they shouldn't turn back on. And that's exactly what we see happens, because this is the master control switch. So only when that's on, the rest of these actually work appropriately, and like we would hope that they would. Okay. It's a little bit hard to get them turned on unless they're turned off, which is just because of the way that I've got these assigned. But anyways, I think that's a really cool little demonstration of the power behind Booleans and what they're capable of. And I think the different lights actually makes it really, really colorful and interesting. And so I hope that you've enjoyed it. I hope that you've learned something. We'll probably learn more on Booleans later. This is kind of the only examples that I can come up with right now, but at least it's a start, and then we'll see where else we can take it, what other examples can be done. There's literally endless things you can do with Booleans. All of computer systems have been built on them, and everything that you've ever seen on computer screens is based and on that foundation, ones and zeros. And so yeah, the possibilities are quite literally endless. And so there you go. That's kind of the tutorial, and we'll see you in the next one.